Hello everyone, I wanted to welcome you to our mushroom forest painting inspiration today. Our paint class today is going to be very whimsical, very light, and I want you to get a little dreamy here. We're going to be using an array of colors and different forms. At any point during this class, I always want you to kind of choose your own path. I want you to kind of make decisions along the way that you're following your intuition. That's really one of the most exciting things about creativity is kind of just following your own intuition along the way, and if you have an idea, to incorporate it. So a few supplies that you'll need for today's class. You'll need something to paint on. I'm painting on 11 by 14 canvas paper today. It's acrylic paper. It's like a mixed media paper. It has a nice heavy body to it. It's a nice alternative to a canvas or a canvas board, but you can certainly use a canvas as well. Today I will be using acrylic paints for our painting today, and I will be using an array of brushes. So about a 1/2 inch size brush to some smaller tipped brushes. So use whatever brushes that you have on hand. You'll be just fine. In addition to the brushes and the paints, you'll need a cup of water to rinse those brushes and a small plate to mix those colors. So go ahead and take a minute to grab those items if you haven't already. In addition, if you have a small paper towel to clean up any messes, you're welcome to grab that as well. But we'll go ahead and jump in and get started. So one of the first things that I'd like to acknowledge for today's inspiration is you can add as much texture as you want to the scene, or you can also keep it very simple. We'll be using an array of blues, purples, teals, and some complementary colors of oranges and reds. You can play with any textures. You can keep it smooth and soft if you want. But we're going to go for a big tree on the left-hand side, and then we'll put some kind of softer trees delicately over on the right, and then we'll have some mushrooms in the foreground. The mushrooms can be lots of different shapes. One of the things I loved about this inspiration was the colors used and the composition. It was really quite fun. So we'll go ahead and jump right into it. The first color that you'll need to mix is a light blue color. So I'm going to go ahead and take my white. Go ahead and open that up. Grab one of the biggest brushes you have. Put a little bit of water on it. And go ahead and take a dollop of your white and put it right on your plate. I might grab 2 dollops of white since I'm right here. I'm just going to put 2 dollops kind of next to each other for future use. And I'm going to grab any blue paint that you have on hand. This is called Blue Lake. I'm going to put a touch of the Blue Lake over here on the side. And I'm going to put my cover back on. Now I have this big brush here that I used. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of this Blue Lake and I'm going to mix it right in with this first white. I'm going for a light blue color of choice. This is just a starting point. We're going to be blending lots of colors. So try to keep the color contained as much as possible. All right. Otherwise, you'll run out of space on your plate. So I'm going to mix this so all of the white is blended into this nice light blue. So just taking a minute and a little patience to mix this color is perfect. And I have some paint on this brush. This brush is a little wonky, but you can see there's a nice flat tip on the side. One of the first things we're going to do is put in our horizon line where our mushrooms will sit, where our tree will come up from. So I'm going to do, the orientation of my canvas today is vertical, which is called portrait. And I'm going to do my ground about 1/3 of the way up. And I'm just going to do a nice smooth horizontal line. It does not need to be perfectly even. This is the forest. The ground is not even. So I have a little bump in the middle. I'm not even worried about that. So the next thing that we're going to do is, now that you have this line, we're going to outline where we want our big tree to be. So for me, intentionally, I have a little bit of a gap. And this is going to be one side of the tree, And this big tree is going to be pretty wide. So I'm basically outlining space for the tree. So this is going to be my big tree here in the middle. And I can always make this bigger if I want. Maybe I'll move this line over a little bit. Make my tree a little bit bigger. And then we're going to paint the rest of this background blue. So this is going to be my big tree right here that we're going to paint a darker color, but the background is going to be blue and teals. So if you wanted to kind of take a minute, and you can be playful of how you paint this background, but this whole right side is the background in the sky. If you wanted to do it all one color, you could. I'm just using this big brush. If you wanted to bring in like a little bit of this blue lake to kind of like bring in some extra color, you could. We'll certainly bring in some teals. You can make those choices. I'm just going to get this on nice and smooth, and then I'll show you how to bring in some teal colors too, which is really fun. But I'm doing nice, smooth, horizontal brush strokes. Based on the paint quality you have, it may be a little darker, it may be a little lighter, it may be a little thicker, it may be a little thinner. So everyone's going to be using different types of paints. Just kind of embrace what you have and just do your best. You may not have the exact same color that I have here. Totally fine. We shouldn't. It's one of the things we do in these classes is I teach you to mix colors that you like. And based on the paint pigments and the colors that you have in your paint set, they're going to be a little different than mine, and it's okay. You may blend a color that's lighter. You may blend a color that's darker. All good. So I'm just filling in, while I'm over here, I'm just filling in. On the other side of this tree, it's also going to be light blue, like a light blue background, like it's going to match everything. So I'm just doing a little bit of some smooth horizontal brush strokes. Now during today's class, I want you to take your time. If I'm moving quickly, just feel free to pause the video if you need to catch up. Enjoy the process. That this is a journey. This is not a marathon, right? This is not a sprint, not a marathon, rather. Just take your time and enjoy this. If you want to start kind of playing with bringing in some teals, you could easily bring in a little bit of a green. Mixing blue and green together will give you a nice teal color. So I'll give you a little bit of a snapshot of what that looks like. I have a phthalo green that I'm using today, and I put a small dollop of that over on my plate. I'm going to take a new dollop of this blue and put that right next to my phthalo green. And I'll show you what happens. So this is a blue lake color, and this is a phthalo green. I'm going to take a minute just to mix these together. And look at that teal. It's so pretty. This is very dark. So I may take a little bit of this nearby white and lighten this up. We want the sky to be light on the sides of the trees. The tree's going to have a darker contrast. So for me, I might add in some like whimsical shapes in here. I may start to, maybe I'll mix some of this light blue and this green together. I just want this side to be nice and light in color. That is our goal for this space. So take a few minutes if you wanted to bring in a little bit of the teal. I just want you to fill in. This is going to be one big tree here. We're going to do that nice and dark in color, but I want this side of your picture to be nice and light. And we will paint some trees in here too. Some blue trees, which would be really fun. Very simplistic. A little funky, a little abstract. All right. So I'm having fun just filling this in. That is the name of the game. It could be any colors you want. We are going to put a lot of things on top of this. So don't be too judgmental of kind of how this looks. I'm just doing smooth horizontal brush strokes just to get something in here. and I'm going to go right next to the tree. If you need to brighten this area, you can make it a little lighter. But again, we're going to be putting, I'm going to make a little bit more. We are going to be putting a lot of things on top of this. So just kind of take this step lightly. And I'm just going all the way over to the edge. I had to mix a little bit more paint, which you may be experiencing the same thing. You can always dip your brush in a little bit of water to kind of help blend in between layers. Water is your best friend when it comes to blending and playing with layers. I teach these techniques in my class often of just putting a little bit of water on your brush. You don't need a lot. But you can kind of work with a little water on your brush. You can kind of work back and forth and really start to help blend these colors in. We are going to put lots of funky trees in here, so I'm not going to spend too much time, but we are going to get this base coat down. We're going to let it dry, and then we're going to come back to it. Okay, so this is going to be one big tree. You see I have a line right here. I just made my tree bigger. That's all that I did. And then I painted the blue sky over here. So what I'm going to do for my next steps is I'm going to let this background dry. I'm going to paint my big tree so it's done and painted so that can dry. And then we'll kind of bop back over and we'll continue to fill in the picture. We're starting with all the elements in the background first, and we're going to work our way around and then work our way forward so those mushrooms will be some of our last pieces. Okay, so if you need to pause the video, feel free. Otherwise, we're going to continue on. I'm going to take a little bit of red and put it next to my blue lake. Red and blue makes purple. Our tree is going to be a purple color. You can decide how rich this may be, which is kind of fun. If you have a darker phthalo blue, you could put in a little touch of a phthalo blue. You can make some of those choices. But find like a dark, rich purple color that you enjoy. And I'm just going to clean my brush. I'm going to use the same big brush. And I am looking for purple. Let's see what we get here. One of the most fun things about art is finding colors that you love, that you enjoy. I put a little bit of the blue lake and a little bit of the phthalo blue together, and I'm getting this really rich, beautiful bluish purple color, which is exactly what I wanted. If it's too dark, you can always add a little bit of white, but I'm going to use my big brush and I'm going to start. You can hold it on the side and do vertical brush strokes. We're going to fill this tree in entirely. We're going to cover up a lot of this tree with mushrooms. So I'm getting some paint on. I'm going to have fun and use a little water to move around this paint. You'll realize the more you paint, you don't need a ton of paint pigment, especially while acrylic is wet. You can use a little water to move it around. But you just have to you have to work a little more quickly if you're going to use the water so it doesn't stick in one spot. I may add a little bit of blue on top of this tree, which is kind of fun to kind of add some additional hues. But in our classes, it's typically we layer upon one layer at a time, and it's really having to trust the process with kind of where we're going. And a class like today's could last anywhere between an hour and a half to 2 hours. So the fortunate thing is the video is being recorded, so you will have the opportunity to kind of pause and come back to this whenever you need to, which is quite nice. And I'm using a little water to fill in the gaps of this tree. My tree may look very dark in the video, but I am going to lighten it in areas. So it's just, again, trusting the process, knowing that it will not be a large purple rectangle. It will be a tree with texture once we're done. So for me, I'm just filling it in, knowing it's our first step. There's always a process and a breakdown on how we do paintings. And the cool thing is that you could do it so many different ways. You can start in different areas, and each artist will do things differently. And guess what? That's okay. Whether you're doing it on your own or you're following another teacher, my approach will be different than others, and it's okay. So just acknowledge if you have thoughts of, oh, we could have done it this way. You're probably right. We could have. But it's all good. So don't let yourself get hung up on those things. Just a part of today's class, of every experience. There's always lots of ways of doing something. So it's kind of an acknowledgement, really. All right. So I have a funky tree. It is not perfectly shaped. Guess what? That's okay. If you wanted to take a minute, I like using the flat side of the big brush to kind of use a nice flat line. You can kind of reshape your tree where you wish. We're going to add lots of like greens and flowers and things on top of this tree, so I'm not worried about it. But I do want my tree to be nice, more straight if possible, because we'll use texture and secondary colors to really bring it to life. But this is a base color, and we're going to let it dry. So if you wanted to kind of add in a little bit of kind of fun landscaping down here, if you wanted to add in a little bit of purple here and there for a little bit of contrast, you can add some purple down here. I'm keeping the white space open because we're going to add other colors. So I'm just adding a little bit of purple here and there. As you can see, I'm adding just like a little bit of a hill, a little bit of landforms. If you wanted to add a little bit of this, you can, because we're going to be putting in greens and blues in all of this other white space. But this purple contrast will help match the tree. So while we have a little bit of this purple on our brush, we might as well add a little bit of purple down here. Kind of makes it look like the ground a little bit, right? It's not even. I'm just using my big brush. I'm maintaining a lot of the white space though. So I'm not going to add any more purple than this. I just wanted a little bit in here to kind of help ground us in some areas, which is kind of fun. So I'm going to clean the purple off my brush. Take a few minutes if you need to play with this or your tree to do that. There are lots of steps in today's class, so I'm going to keep things moving and shaking. So again, if you need to go slow down or go at your own pace, feel free to do that. And we're going to go back to this side over here, and we're going to add in some funky trees. We're going to add in some light purple trees. We'll add in some like light teal trees. We're just going to have a little bit of fun, okay? One of the first things you're going to need is just grabbing a smaller brush. You're going to want a brush that's fairly small. So like one of these size brushes will work. If you've received brushes from me in the past, I have a size 2, a size 2, a size 2, maybe a 2 or a 3 would be fine for this step. And we're going to add 2 layers of trees. We're going to do a light green trees first in the background, and then we're going to do a light purple kind of layered of trees on top. And I'm going to be a little abstract with these tree shapes. So I want you to do any style tree that you want, but I'm going for something that's a little different than we usually do. So the first step that I'm going to do is I have a little bit of teal on my plate. I'm going for like a little bit more of a green, so I'm just going to put a small dollop of the phthalo green. And I want to make sure I have a little bit of the white handy, because we're going to soften this a little bit. And I have a little bit of white, so I think I'm in good shape. And I'm going to get that number 2 brush or that number 3 brush ready. And I'm going to take a little bit of this phthalo green and mix it with a little bit of this white. Now, if this is too minty green, the color that we're going for is a little bit more neutral. So some of you might have, I'm going for a little more sage green. So I actually have a little bit of this light green here. I'm just going to put a little bit of this light green nearby. I want you to find a lighter color of green. I want it to stand out on this though, so it doesn't have to be too light. There we go. That's a little bit better. We're going for like earthy forest colors, right? So this is a little bit of blue and a little bit of green mixed together. This is exactly what I wanted. It's kind of like a bright sage. Maybe it's one way to put it. All right, so I'm gonna have some fun here. I'm gonna add a couple layers of trees. These are gonna be skinny tree trunks. So I'm just gonna be a little courageous and just do a long skinny tree trunk. And I'm just gonna do the tree trunk, maybe it'll go up. And I'm just gonna do some kind of funky branches. It's kind of like a tall pine a little bit. And this is just going to be in the distance. It's going to be plain in color. Maybe I'll do 3. We'll see how it goes. Maybe the top half only has branches, and this is a tall woodlands forest, right? So I'm using my imagination a little bit. And I'm just doing kind of like squiggly, kind of horizontal lines, trying to piece this in to make it look like trees a little bit. If you can't really see these, you can always take like another color. I'm taking like a little bit of this teal and just kind of like tucking it in just to add a little bit of, oh, there's a tree here. Especially if mine's a little darker right here. So that's kind of helping kind of pop it out. So I'm being a little abstract, having a little fun. I'm just doing a little bit of lightness on the undersides of these. And you can make a choice if you want to do another tree or not. Maybe I'll do another one and I'm staggering the heights of these. Maybe I'll do another one over here. And I'm just having fun. We're going to let this dry and we're going to do some purple trees on top. So again, we're creating kind of a woodlands forest. And we're going to use this same green down below. So we're going to start to add in just some shrubbery. Imagine grass kind of tucked in on some of these rocks. Now I'm going to spread out the use of this color intentionally, just in case I run out of it. Now we've all run out of paint before, right? So I'm kind of tucking in this color into my forest. I'm tucking it in and around my purple. See how it's grounding the bottom of the forest? How fun is that? Maybe I'll do some of this green right down here. So we're going to use lots of really fun different colors. If you need to mix a little bit more, feel free. You can put some at the base of your tree. I'm kind of just using what I have here. And you can see I'm visually spreading this green out. I did some underneath. I did some kind of tucked up on here. We're going to use so many different colors blended in. If anyone's inspired to kind of grab, I have like a teal nearby. I might grab a little bit of teal with a little water on my brush. It's really fun mixing colors together, especially while they're wet. So I may tuck in a little bit of teal, maybe at the bottom of this. Dipping my brush in a little bit of water. One of the really cool things that we'll be doing in today's classes that I'll encourage you to do is blending different colors together. So I have this light sagey green that I use for these trees. I kind of tucked it in areas. but I have a little water and a little bit of this sage color that I'm kind of I'm tucking in as well. So be open-minded as you kind of fill this in. The nice thing is if you paint something you don't like, you can always paint over it. So I'm not painting on top of the purple. We're gonna actually add more like leafy greens in, but this is just background color that we're kind of filling in our forest floor with, which is really fun. So you can play a little bit with like the blues and the turquoises that you have on your plate to start to fill in just a little bit of this color here and there. You don't have to go too crazy. If you wanted to kind of bring in a little bit more of the purple in areas, you could. We're going to be layering our mushrooms on top of all this. But I'm just going to see what I have for my greens. Maybe I'll have like a big bush right here. So maybe if I want to cover up some of the purple, I can. So you can kind of make choices of like where you want to put things. We'll do more of that, but I want you to play with the colors on your palette. Maybe you bring in a little bit of blues and teals. Again, we're going to bring in more greenery, but this is kind of a fun way to fill this in. Well, all these paints are wet. And I took a dollop of water and I brought it right on to my plate. And that's kind of helping, one, blend the colors on my plate, but also blend colors on my palette, on my canvas too. Now again, we'll bring in more greenery. This is just kind of base colors to fill in this background. And what a fun transition from doing these trees. We're intentionally letting these dry right now, by the way. Imagine that. And then we'll do more. So I'm kind of looking at, well, what other colors do I have on my palette, on my plate? I have some teals and I have some blues. Get a little water, see what happens here. You can blend one color with another because it's all going to be in the same family, right? You could get a little water on your brush. You want to fill all those white kind of nooks and crannies in. So take some time as a first layer, fill in this whole bottom space with some blues and greens as you wish. And just know we're going to put in like real grass-like areas. It's not just going to be a smudge, an array of color, but this is kind of a fun opportunity to add in some darks and some lights, kind of playing with the colors on your palette. I'm just spreading them all around, which is really kind of fun. The layering of the ground, right? Some of this may look like grass to you already. That's what art and creativity is all about. It's just kind of being in the moment and seeing what happens, because it'll start to talk to you and you'll get inspired. I brought in some more teals over here. Love these teals. So use whatever colors you want where. Some of you might already have like a color palette in mind that you want to follow. But I love the combination of colors that are happening here. Love, love, love. You could do some kind of grass blades kind of coming up onto the tree if you want. This is where you can incorporate some of your own ideas. No harm, no foul. But the more that this white dissipates on the ground, this is where it will start to look a little more earthy with these blues and greens. And maybe it's just greens, maybe you have teals. Again, this purple contrast is good because it matches our tree. I'm using water and paint. I'm going back consciously to bring more water. It's also helping me fill in these nooks and crannies nice and easily. Have fun with bringing in a little teal over here, and then come over here and find a little white nook and cranny and paint a little teal in there. And then it will start to match and pair visually, which is really fun. I did a little bluish teal over here. Well, that means I should probably bring some over here on the left side. Now this is, again, we're going to intentionally let this dry. And we're going to come back in and add more greenery in and our mushrooms will be laid in here as well in the future. Okay, you can see I added a little bit of lighter colors too, just a touch kind of here at the top. We really want this to stay a little darker, but if you wanted to add in a little touch of some lighter colors, a little bit's okay. And I'm doing it kind of towards the top, but we want to keep this really grounded and earthy down here. Okay. So take a few minutes to play with that. If you need to stop and get a drink of water, if you need to take a break, feel free to do that at any time. Our tree is now drying. Our tree is probably almost dry at this point. We're going to add in some light purple trees to kind of layer into this forest, which will be really fun. So I'm going to use the same brush that I was using before. I used the 2 brush to do all of this, and I used the 2 brush to do these trees. We're going to do the same style trees. Whatever you did before, I want you to do the same style. I'm going to take a small dollop of white. And I have a little purple left over from the big tree. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a small dollop of the purple from the big tree, and I'm going to mix it in with white. And this is what's going to give me a light purple for these trees that I'm going to layer on top. If you wanted to make this a little bit more like a bluish purple, you can. Ooh, yeah, I added a little bit of blue. You can choose the color. Just find a color that you like. Don't want it to be too dark. Don't want it to be too light. It kind of needs to be this is on the lighter side, but I want to make sure it stands out enough. If it's too white, then you're not going to see it. All right, so I'm going to have some fun. I'm going to do some layering. So I'm going to do a purple tree trunk. And I'll decide as I get going here if it needs to be darker or lighter, but I'm just going to have some fun and just maintain this fun. And I'm gonna go behind. And then I'm gonna layer another one on top. So I'm gonna kind of put the tree trunks in between my other trees, and I'm also gonna stagger the height. So you can see this tree, purple tree, is a little lower than the green one. Good. My tree trunk's a little wobbly. I gotta fix that. And then I staggered the second purple tree in between these 2 green ones, and I kind of did the height a little in between these. So I made it a little lower than the one next to it. And I'm just doing some of this fun abstract kind of tree style. Maybe I'll come in with some dark purple and kind of play with that a little bit. And I either need to do a really short tree here, or I need to do a tall one. I think I'm going to do a tall one. So you can see I'm staggering the heights, so it kind of mixes in with the forest. So you just start with that tree trunk. And I'm kind of breezing through these trees. I'm going kind of quickly. You're probably like, Megan, slow down. I'm doing a simple approach for these just because it's a different, it's just different style, and it's okay to do different styles. If you're doing your own particular kind of style of tree, go for it. Take your time. Always take your time. Always go at your own speed. You can kind of ignore me if you want. I got a little teal. I'm going to put a little bit of teal kind of into these trees just to kind of make them stand out just a little bit more. This is like a tealish purple color. If I don't like it, guess what? I can come in and paint over it. No big deal. I might come in with a little bit of a darker purple and do darker purple shading on the underside of these branches. That might look cool. We're going to put a lot of mushrooms and things down here, so don't worry too much of kind of what's next or what's going to happen. I'm going to take a little bit of dark purple, mix it with a little of my other purple, and I'm just going to do a little bit of just a little bit of shading on the underside of these trees, just so they stand out just a little bit. Again, I'm being really abstract today. If you don't want to do these style trees, you don't have to. A little of a shaded color on the underside will kind of make them pop a little bit, make them stand out. I follow a lot of artists on Instagram, and we all get our inspirations from different places. And this technique, this kind of sporadic tree technique, is something I've seen other people do. And I'm like, oh, I got to try that. And that's one of the things about art is you may be inspired by a technique or by a color or by a form. And just hold on to that. Maybe take a picture, write it down. I'm getting a little bit of a darker green. I kind of like what I'm doing here. I'm just going to add a little bit of darker green, just a little bit to the underside of these green trees. Maybe a little bit down the tree trunk. I don't want to lose these too much. I don't want to make it too busy either. So I'm just kind of being a little playful. But I'm going to keep it simple. I'm not going to do much more than that. In the inspiration, there is some like other kind of random greenery that kind of comes in. I'm just going to be a little abstract and just bring in a little extra greenery here and there. If you don't want to do this, you don't have to. It's kind of like there's trees around these that are kind of hanging down. Maybe it's this big tree. Maybe there's a big branch coming down right here. I'm just going to kind of add in a little bit of extra things to fill this space. Just a little bit. Maybe there's, and I'll dip my brush in a little bit of water. This is a little bit more abstract, so if folks don't want to do these things, you don't have to. But I'm just going to add in a little bits of touches of like other random things in the background. Just extra little dark colors. Again, we're going to add more green coming up. And we're going to have a really clear mushroom in this space too. So I just added a few extra kind of random green green things kind of floating around. If you don't like these things, you don't need to do them. If you want your trees to stand out, you can do like a dark contrasting line down the sides. So if you don't want these trees to get lost, I have a little bit of my Phthalo green here. I could do a dark Phthalo thin green line down the sides of these trees. If they're starting to get lost, you can use that shaded technique. This is a subtle thing that's happening in the distance. So mine is like really funky and abstract. I'm just gonna leave it right now and let it be and let it dry. While we have different purples on our brush and our palette right now, we can add some texturizing to our tree. So one of the things you can consider is on our big purple tree, you can add in some lighter purple. So you can add in some kind of lighter purple texturing kind of on the outside. I'm going to dip my brush in a little water. The trick is to use a little water, and you want to, you can use your finger to smudge a little bit, but we're just trying to like highlight some of the character on this tree. So maybe there's like a little bit of bark here and there. You can use your finger to smudge. You can pretend like you're drawing a little piece of bark and then maybe smudge it in. This is just to add a little texture to this tree. I have a small gap of the dark purple where I put the lighter line, because the darker purple and having like the middle be a little lighter and have some of the lighter texture with some water helps you kind of hold that overall shape. I don't want to cover up the darker purple, but I do want to add some like darker purples and darker blues and greens. So I'm mixing in like a little bit of like a purple and a teal together right here, just to kind of add in. Maybe you have some like horizontal slats kind of coming in. You can be playful with what you want to do with your tree texture. So I'm kind of just having fun. Sometimes your artwork doesn't have to be like perfect. The nice thing is you can always, if you do something you don't like, you can always get that dark purple and paint over anything. So that dark purple, the color of this tree, you can always recreate. You can soften or darken anything. In the inspiration, it's super funky. I'm not going to go as funky as they have, but you can do some like vertical and some horizontal lines, just kind of coming across, kind of like if you're doing a birch tree. It's very similar. You could use your finger and smudge it in if you don't want brush strokes. I'm literally playing with like this grayish purple color right now with like a little teal, and I put water on my plate and I'm just swirling it together, and it's kind of giving me a tealish purple color. It's kind of fun. And then I'm putting it on my I'm putting it on my tree, and I can do some smudging with my finger, which is kind of fun to kind of create a little bit of roundedness on the tree. Kind of fun. So it's just bringing the tree to life a little bit. And I have a little too much blue on one side, so I'm just kind of covering that up. And the other thing I want you to consider is like mix some more of that dark purple. If you're out, just mix a little bit more. I want to make sure you're happy with the shape of your tree. For me, the bottom of the tree looks a little funky, so I'm going to just reshape it. So I'm just going to make a little bit more of that color. And that color for me for the purple was, I had a little blue lake, I had a little red, and a little phthalo blue. So I'm being a little sporadic and showing you lots of different things. You don't have to follow my crazy ways. However, I'm here to inspire you to try new things. That is the name of the game. So I'm slowing down right now to make more of that purple, the dark original purple, so I can really just make sure I'm happy with the size of my tree, the shape of my tree, etc. I'm mixing that here. Grounding colors. And knowing if you don't like something, you can always paint over it. But always take a minute to ground yourself. Make sure you have the right colors. Make sure you have the right brush. Okay? So for me, my tree is bending a little bit here. So I'm going to do just a revised brush stroke to come down. See how I just grounded my tree a little bit right here into the forest? I needed that. And that little brush stroke just really set my tree a little bit straighter. And this is grass that's coming up in front of it. That's done intentionally. Okay. So anywhere, maybe you just do another solid outline. I'm not going to go too much more crazy with this tree. You know, I'm being mindful of time. You can see kind of what we're doing here. If you want the bottom of your tree to flare out just a little bit, like it's rooting, you can have it come out a little bit if you want it to. That is totally fine if you want to add just a little bit of flare, like these are the roots of the tree. You can do that. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. You can even add like a little knot, maybe coming up over here, like that's a part of the tree. Like you can do things like that if you wanted to. You also have that dark purple in here, so that dark purple will come in handy as we do some final texturizing down here in this space. Okay. So we have this scene that's actually coming together. Imagine that. All right. So I want you to take a couple minutes, finish your tree. I'll bring my tree nice and close so you can see. It's very simple. I just added a little texture, a little softness. It's not just like a boring purple tree anymore. It has like a little bit of life to it, but I kept it pretty simple. Okay. So our next step will be to add some vibrant green foliage to this inspiration. We've already done some basic ground cover, but we're going to do some really beautiful green foliage that's really going to make this picture stand out. And we're going to do that by using yellow and green. So I'm taking a small dollop of yellow, and I'm just putting that yellow like right here on top of all these green areas. And then I'm going to put the cap back on my yellow. And I'm going to put a little bit of this light green nearby. Now I may have the phthalo green. Everybody's going to have different green paints at home. Use what you have. And I'm first going to start out by mixing a little bit of the yellow with a little bit of this green. Now you can take like a small dollop of one or the other, and you're going to get this beautiful vibrant green. This is like a lime green color. We're actually going to make even a wilder color than this, but we're going to start with this here. And we're going to put in a little bit of grass, a little bit of foliage, like you're tucking in some bushes. You're going to start with one color. I'm actually going to paint on top of this purple. And you're just going to add a little bit of this green foliage here. I'm just going to tuck in a little bit over here. You could do some long lines. We're just starting to add some like grass-like structure. And just start tucking it in. I might tuck a little bit in here. We want it to match, right? We want our plants to all be kind of in similar areas, similar textures. Maybe I'll add a little bit of that green down here. I'm going for visual balance for the eye. So you can see I'm not covering up like all of my work that I've done. I'm just adding this as an accent, as some additional foliage. I'm not doing like exact grass blades or anything like that. I'm just adding in some additional green foliage to bring this to life. And now this is going to be different for everyone because we all have, our landscape is totally different down here on the bottom. So get in a little bit of green like I did. And then I'm going to have you get a little crazy. I'm going to have you mix a little bit more yellow to this green. And I'm going to have you do little kind of dots. And actually I need a little bit of white too. Let's see. I have a little bit of extra white on my palette. I'm going to add a little bit of white to this to make it a little brighter. This is kind of a fun touch. I'm just going to add kind of like little dots, little bits of, and if you wanted to use like a tiny brush and do tiny little brush strokes, you could here. So let me switch to a tiny brush and I'll give you some tiny detail here to play with. Let's see here. You can find one of the smallest brushes you have, and you can take this really light color. You could even put a little bit of water on it too to help break it up. Of course, I didn't put water on my brush before I got started. And you can kind of come in and you can add like little tiny, you can add some green grass leaves kind of coming up. You could add little dots. This is where you can be playful with any of these colors. Adding some green grass blades coming up down here. I do need a little bit more white. I want this to really stand out. So you can play with the grass blades, kind of high and low, alternating down here. See how it came over the purple? Really cool. Maybe we do some more grass blades kind of coming up, maybe on top of the tree a little bit. See how they're matching visually? Take your time with a nice steady hand. You can do some grass blades coming up. You can spin your brush on your palette so you have a nice fine point. But this color is a beautiful accent. If you wanted to do some darker green grass blades kind of tucked in, you could. You could do like phthalo grass blades. Play with adding a little grass-like texture. You could just use this small brush just to add some kind of random detail, but play with this for a few minutes. This is all a part of our scene. We're going to put our mushrooms into the scene. And it kind of pause. I want you to reflect on what you're doing along the way. Don't feel like you need to add too much. For me, I'm being really thoughtful of what I add and where. But it requires all of us just to kind of pause and reflect on the process. How high do we want these grass blades to go? But this is where our scene really comes to life. And this is where we can start to appreciate all of the color work that we did previously to build this forest scene. Right? Maybe do a second coat of paint on some of these grass blades to really make them stand out. You can make some of those choices. Use those colors on your palette. Don't hesitate to get like a dollop of water. Bring it on to really mix some colors. Spin that brush on your plate. And bring in some more colors. It doesn't matter. You just want things to match, visually balanced. So I'm going to call it good with these grass blades. I have a nice balance. It's very abstract, but I kind of like where it's going. So you as an artist can decide how much or how little you want to do here. I'm going to put a little bit more white on my palette. You're going to know what you need to do. I'm going to just do some little dotted designs just on top of some of the purples, just to add some kind of fun dot-like texture by some of these bushes and plants. So take a few minutes to play with this bottom area. Again, make sure that all the white nooks and crannies are filled. So that's something that I'll go around and do as well. I'm just gonna, a little water on the brush with a little bit of paint. You can kind of go around and find all these little nooks and crannies and kind of just push down a little bit and fill them in. You can pick any color that you want. It could be a bright color, it could be a neutral color. But you can see I've created this forest scene, right? That's what we're going for. This is our mushroom forest. Our mushrooms are coming very soon, by the way. All right. So take your time here. We're going to tuck our mushrooms into the scene. And I think I'm done playing around a little bit, so I'm going to pause and not do any more work with my bottom area. But if you need to keep working, feel free. There's a couple different style mushrooms that we can paint to incorporate into this picture. I'll talk through some of that, as we want our bottom to be like fairly dry before we do our mushrooms. So this is a great point in class where I want you to be happy with kind of what's going on up here. I went really abstract kind of in the distance here. I like it. It's not like overly detailed. It's very like nature-like. But if you wanted to tuck anything else into this background, feel free to do that now. I don't know. I feel like it needs something. It's one of those things where every artist kind of at their own liberty here to fill in this background. Maybe I'll just tuck in a little bit of green in between these trees. I don't know. We'll see what's going to happen. But we're going to transition. I'm not going to touch the bottom anymore because we are going to do mushrooms very soon. So try to let the bottom dry. And then we'll start and transition to our mushroom colors. Some of my trees, yeah, I think they're okay. You can kind of make some choices if you want to add anything else. This is a busy forest, so I'm going to have fun with just making it a little bit more jungle-like. I'm just kind of adding a little bit of random green in between these trees. This is a busy place. And in the inspiration, it's like a very kind of busy forest scene. If anybody wants to kind of make these trees stand out a little bit more, you can. I could do some funky outlining right now, which I'm kind of tempted to try. It's a little bit, I'm just going to do a little funky outlining. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. I'm being a little in the moment, have an idea. But I may do like a little bit of funky kind of dark outlining on these trees just to kind of make them stand out a little bit more. Because I want to see these trees in the distance, but I don't want them to be like the focus. So I love the work that I did, but I'm just going to come in and I'm doing a light. I made it stand out just a touch. I'm using a tiny brush and I'm just doing like a dark purple softly kind of on top just to highlight these branches, a little bit of nature. I love all the colors underneath. I'm just taking a little bit of extra time. And it matches visually with the big purple tree. You could add a little bit of white to the dark purple to kind of soften it just a little bit, but I could do the same thing with the green trees. I may not, but if you wanted to do something similar with the green trees, you could. But that little bit of dark purple I added just adds a little bit of contrast. It was kind of a safe way to make them stand out just a little bit. And that was a little courage, right? I wasn't planning on it, but I wanted to do something to really tie it all in together. And for me, it really did that. So this is just a little bit of an example of being courageous. If you have an idea, try it. If I didn't like this, I could have easily painted over this darker purple with that lighter purple again. So that just shows you like the little of risk that kind of goes into making some choices and decisions. Just follow your intuition, right? All right. Now we're going to move to mushrooms. You're going to need some clean white on your canvas. I'm just going to grab a little bit of this white right here. And you can mix like a little bit of this purple in with your white, so you kind of have like a light purple stem. If you want to mix like a really light purple stem color, you could do that. And we're going to do some mushroom placements. So these are going to be our stems. We may even outline our mushrooms too with this purple color because we're going to paint over it a little bit. So I want you to grab the smallest brush you have. And you can spin your brush. And we're going to do mushroom placement first. So the first mushroom is going to be over here. And the stem isn't going to be too high. And I'm going to be kind of deliberate on where I place it. This stem is just going to, it could be fairly straight. You might not even be able to see that. I'm going to make it, you don't need to make it too thick. There, so that's a mushroom stem right there, believe it or not. I'm going to add another mushroom stem. And if you want it to be used just pure white, you could. I'm going to do one big mushroom over here, and it's going to be right in front of the tree. So I'm doing just the stem. The top of the mushroom is going to go on top of it. But this mushroom stem, it's going to start kind of right here where my finger is. And I'm going to say it's going to go to right about here. And this mushroom stem, you kind of start narrow. I'm just doing a line. And then you kind of shape it a little bit. So the mushroom stems, they're not going to be too big. This one might have like a little knot in the middle. And it can be a little wider at the bottom. Like it's grounding into the earth. You know what that's like? So that's like another mushroom stem. So I have 2 in here. You can, if you start smaller with your mushroom stems, you can always make them bigger. So it's always better to start small. And then I'm going to have another mushroom kind of popping out over here. It's going to have a little bit of a bend to it. And the big mushroom's going to go on top. So if you wanted to put more in, you could. Maybe I'll put in just one more little one over here. Okay, so I'm going to do 4 mushrooms, like orange mushrooms, with some purples built in. One of the things you can do is, there's a couple different designs for these mushrooms. There is the mushrooms that kind of go up, kind of like an upside down umbrella, and then there's the ones that kind of come down. I'm going to do 2 different styles of mushrooms. One mushroom is going to be like the rounded down, and I'm going to do an outline in white. So I'm going to do a rounded umbrella, an upside down U over here, and then you're going to give the mushroom a bottom and a top. So you're going to do this line for the rim. So this is the underside of the mushroom, and the stem, look at that, is going to be right in there. So that's one mushroom, and you can play with these designs and these styles. Then there's this like funky upward mushroom that's happening over here, and this one's going to kind of like come down a little bit. And it's going to kind of have a little bit of a wobble to it. Kind of looks like a flower a little bit. But it's going to have these like really cool kind of rings coming up. So I'm being a little abstract with that undersided mushroom. We'll play with that. But you can kind of tuck in whatever ones you want where. So it's kind of like that upside down one. You can kind of put your mushrooms in wherever you want. I'll do kind of another upside down one. That was a little scary, but I'll do it anyways. You can kind of turn and shape your mushrooms in different ways, which is really fun. But these white outlines are going to help us because then we can kind of fill our mushrooms in. So start simple. All right, so take your time doing those outlines, but I'm going to shift us to making an orange as you're doing that. To make an orange, it is yellow with a tiny dollop of red. So I just did a fresh dollop of yellow on my plate, and I'm going to put a fresh dollop of red just nearby. Do not put your red right in your yellow, because to make an orange, it's very little red, believe it or not. So a tiny, tiny touch of red in your yellow will go a long way. So take a moment to mix an orange color. This is kind of a blood orange color. You may need to add a little bit of white if it doesn't like stick on top of the purples, but we'll kind of get there when we get there. But take a minute to mix an orange of choice. I'm going to keep it orangey. I'm not going to make it too red yet because we can do red as an accent color. All right. So this is where we can have some fun. The top sides of these mushrooms are orange. The bottom side of these mushrooms are going to be blues and purples. So keep that in mind. I want you to start and just do some lines coming down to fill the mushroom with color. Try doing single brush strokes. Don't just fill the mushroom in as orange. Do some very deliberate lines. And I'm going to do more orange coats on top of that. And that's the one I started on with lines. For this one over here, the rounded cap ones, you can kind of do yellow rounded on the top. We'll put a little bit of red on the tops of these too. So the tops of these rounded ones will be a little red and a little orange. So if anybody wants to get a little crazy and do a little bit of red and orange kind of mixed on top with blended colors, you could do that right now if you wanted to. This paint is not it's not like a full coverage right now. It's gonna take a couple coats of this for it to stand out on top of the background. So do a single coat, know that you're gonna see the forest behind it, let it dry. I'm just gonna do a little bit of the orange on the underside of this cap. I'm just doing little brush strokes. If you wanted to kind of fill this in on the underside of the caps, we need to put a base coat under here anyways. You could do that if you wanted to. But I want the white mushroom stem to kind of come under the cap. See how the mushroom stem is coming up and under? You could do that. But just add a little bit of orange. For these upside down ones, you can just do these lines, which is really fun. You can kind of follow the white rim. Keep the white rim on the top if you can. And then rinse and repeat. So just know that this orange is just a first coat. If you do a nice thin coat, we can come back to it and paint on top of it. So this is a little bit of patience, but this is where everything in our painting will come together. If you wanted to get a little crazy and bring in a little bit of red on the top of these caps, you can. Again, we'll do more of that, but have fun with filling in these mushrooms. So the tops of these mushroom caps are going to be orange and red for me. So as it starts to dry, you can come in and fill it in. Hold those white lines because that's what's going to allow the shape to stay in form. Maybe do a brush coat. Come back to it. You could get a little crazy and bring in a little bit of red into these orange lines too here. We're going to do blue on the bottom of these upside down ones after. So play with mixing your colors. Ooh, so fun. Mixing red and oranges so you can see both colors on these mushrooms. Maybe that's your challenge for today, is to see the reds and see the oranges on these mushrooms. You're all doing a great job. I hope you're enjoying today's class. And you can see the paint is starting to dry, which is great. And our mushrooms are starting to come to life, which is really cool, right? Well, it's going to get even cooler here as we keep going. So the next thing I'll have you consider is I'm going to have you put a little bit of blue on your plate. I'm going to use phthalo blue. You could also use like a purple, a lighter purple on the underside of your flowers too. But I'm going to start with the phthalo blue just to kind of show you what it looks like. Phthalo blue and a little bit of the white. But the underside of these flowers, we kind of want to match our scene. So I might use phthalo blue with a little purple. We're kind of going for like a darker, like a mid-tone purple kind of color. And you're going to ground the underside of these mushrooms. So you can do a little bit of darker lines to kind of add shading. Now you could use this darker purple. I think a little bit of white and the dark purple would probably be our best mix because we don't want it to blend in to the background tree, but we want it to stand out. So I think the purple mixed with a little bit of white is probably our best. And then if you wanted to mix a little bit of blue in with that, you could. You kind of have to play with it a little bit. But there is blue built in here. So I'm bringing in a little bit of blue and purple on the underside of these mushrooms. The blue is good right near the stem. So if you wanted to kind of outline this stem, this is where the shading is, and this is kind of where it curls. So use these blue brush strokes to really curl the underside. We'll use some white after to create some highlighted areas. But maybe there's like a little bit of a curve here. We can come in with some white, but bring in a little bit of shading on the underside of these mushrooms, and you could have a little bit of curve. These might look more like flowers to you, so just do your best. I'm adding a little bit of this darker blue, again, around each stem. And this is where you can start to see some of the shading come in. This one's a really good example of that over here. A little bit of, this is like blue and purple kind of mixed together. A little bit of shading on the underside of these. And we'll add some purple to our stems too. So if you wanted to play with kind of adding in a little bit of this earthy purple to your stems. The stems aren't going to be white. We'll bring them to life a little bit. But the white, it's going to have a little bit of this purple on it too. But the white is really allowing, and I'm doing a little bit of the color and just kind of dragging my finger down. But you can see how the white is really allowing our eye. And this is like a watery bluish purple on my brush. I'm just dragging a little color and then I'm smudging it with my finger. That's how I created that instance or that essence. But this is where you can start to add different shading in areas, whether it's at like the bottom of your mushroom forest. I'm putting a little bit of purple kind of grounded in, maybe down here on the base. This is just starting to really highlight and capture that scene. If you having a little bit of shading on these mushroom stems is awesome. Really just tells the world kind of what's going on here. But you can see how the white is really helpful to make those stand out. Again, a little bit of a contrasting line down the side. If you wanted to just do a tiny dark purple outline down the side of the stem, you could do that too. Smudging it makes it blend in a little bit more, which makes it look a little bit more natural. So you can consider that as well. But I want you to be happy with these mushrooms. So we'll do a little bit of white touch-up work after, but I want you to play with the purples and the oranges first. So I'm going to clean my brush. I'm going to go back to my oranges because I want my oranges to stand out. But play with purple and orange and like some of the blues on the underside of these mushrooms. Take a few minutes to play with that. The smaller the brush you use, the better. You can spin that brush. You can add like this line-like detail. This orange really needs a second coat to stand out. I'm going to mix this orange with a little bit of white. That will make it stand out even more because it will be a lighter tone of orange, which is good in this case. So I'm mixing a little bit of white and orange right here. It's kind of making it a little bit of a sorbet color. That will look beautiful with this contrasting colors. And I'm just doing some lines kind of coming down. And I'll add a little bit more, some like lighter colors too, like lighter, whiter colors, but you can kind of be playful with this. My mushrooms look like flowers a little bit. I think I'm okay with that. It's okay for for whatever to happen in these classes. It's just bound to happen. Things are not always going to look like they should, and it's okay. On the underside of these mushrooms, you can do like long lines, kind of like a sunburst on the bottom. Look at that. To give it the under texture of the mushroom shape. For consideration. I'll do the same thing over here for that one. And I'm using like orange and white mixed together. So this is a really great class to play with different tones and shades of given colors. Maybe I'll get a little crazy. I'll add a little bit of red on the top of these mushrooms in the distance right here. Ooh, baby. A little bit of red on the top. Kind of half and half. And all these colors pair so well together. So beautiful. You might lose your mushroom shape a little bit. You can we'll use white in a minute to kind of go back and find our mushrooms. So like this one, I need to add a little bit more of like the blue back in. Let's see here. I have my white rim is a little bit too wide, so I kind of need to kind of re-guide. There, I had to find the bottom of my mushroom again. There we go. So the white is a nice way to kind of highlight the edges. This is a really good example of that. So is this. But you want to make sure that the white lines aren't too thick. So it's kind of finding a balance in that regard. But this is where you can really bring your mushroom forest to life. You could add a lot more like greenery, kind of tucked up layering on top. This is where you can use your own eye and kind of follow along. I'm gonna let my mushrooms dry and then I'll do some final like white detail work to show you. But it's always good in these classes to kind of pause and reflect along the way. What else do I want to add and where? Do I want to add anything else? I am going to let my mushrooms dry. I'm going to play with my green space down here a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit more of this kind of fun, brighter green texture. I'm going to add a little bit of white to it so it really stands out. I'm just going to add maybe some grass-like. I don't know what I'm really going for. I'm just adding in a little bit of extra life down here. And this is like yellow and green mixed together. It's just a little bit of extra contrast to the eye. In the inspiration, there's like little kind of like buds kind of trickling up. I love these, like, I love this little dot-like texture. You could try doing a little of the dot-like texture. Kind of like it's a certain plant or something. I don't know. I'm not gonna add too much of it. I want to have a nice balance of dark and light colors. Kind of look and see where you might need to add a little bit of like a darker green to kind of ground in any areas. This is where you can kind of make any of those final touches. Do you have enough of the dark purple contrast, right? That could be a big thing to consider. I have subtle areas of the dark purple. If you need to add more of that in, feel free. Because one of the things that you have noticed, hopefully throughout the class today, is that it's all layers. So you can always come back in and add more layers. Maybe you want more grass blades over an area. Go and add some more grass blades. Let it dry and then add more, or add a darker color. Those are all choices. Just know that it's okay to let something dry and go back in. All right. I'm gonna add in, I'm craving a little bit more teal in my life here. So I'm gonna mix a little teal, which is green and blue. And this is where everybody's gonna kind of find their own sweet spot of what else they wanna add, whether it's a color or a shape. I need to make this a little lighter. Alright, I'm just gonna find some spots where I can just tuck in some of this soft teal-like. Maybe it's at the bottom of this down here. Maybe it's a little bit down here. This is where you can kind of lean back in your chair and make modifications. Some of you could easily spend, I mean, any of us could easily spend another hour on this, and I encourage you to do so if you wish. This is where I want you to play around with the detail. I'm coming in with a smaller brush and just making some of these grass blades nice and clean and clear. This is one of those you got to slow down to really refine. These grass blades might need a second coat of paint. Acknowledge that for them to really stand out on this background. You can dip your brush in a little bit of water to help mix up any paint that you may already have on your palette. Some paints may be dry on your palette, some may not be. Okay, I'm doing second coats of grass blades. It's kind of like I'm doing lighter green grass blades kind of on other existing grass blades, and it's really just making them stand out. All right, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to show you how to do some white, just white final work with a little bit of white paint. This is really going to make my mushrooms crisp and clean. On the top sides of these mushrooms with a tiny brush, I'm just going to do a little white outline. If that is too white for you, you can do a little bit of like a light orange kind of mixed in with it. And if you don't want it to be all white like that, you could just take a little bit of the red and the orange and just make it a little more subtle. That works too, okay? So play with how you're using white. You don't need a lot of white. Let's see here, what do I got for colors? Your colors can get pretty mucky pretty quickly on your brush. So I'm just gonna go back with a clean brush and do the white again, just in some areas, as promised, because I got mucky pretty quickly. I like the way that I have only a little bit of white on the top of this mushroom, but I'm just gonna make it a little bit brighter. It doesn't have to be a full outline. You could just outline different parts of the mushroom. I like how the white is represented on this mushroom. I'm just making it a little bit more clean. I might make the left side of this mushroom have a little bit of a white outline. So I want you to consider adding like a little bit of shading to these mushroom stems. I want you to have contrast. So maybe I take a little purple and a little bit of white. I want you to have contrast, but I also want you to have a little bit of highlighting. So these are choices you get to make. So you can do what you're comfortable with. One of the more important things is making sure that this mushroom stem is coming up into your mushroom. Very important. And that one's coming up nicely. This is kind of like on the side a little bit over here, which is kind of fun. Happened unintentionally. But just make sure it looks natural and like where it comes in. If you need to put like a little bit of orange to kind of like soften it, you could do that. Again, the contrast is your friend here. So a little bit of a darker shade on the underside of these mushrooms is not a bad thing. I added a little bit of a purple line underneath the rim of this mushroom to really highlight the shading. So you can see what a little bit of a purple shaded mark does on the undersides of these mushrooms. And you can see that clearly in these two, how they're a little shaded on the underside. So you can do that with a little light purple. I'm going to bring up a little bit more shaded into the underside of this, but I think I'm pretty close. I'm pretty happy with my mushrooms and my woodland forest. I hope that you all enjoyed today's painting. I would love to see your artwork after today's class. Feel free to take as much or as little time as you wish for our art. And I want to thank you so much for being here. Feel free to write me with any questions, and have a wonderful rest of your day. And I congratulate you and applaud you for making time for you. And I hope you enjoyed this. All right. Take care, everybody.